I'm Anna, and the life I once cherished turned into an unrecognizable nightmare. It all began one quiet evening when my phone rang abruptly, breaking the silence of my cozy apartment. The screen displayed an unexpected name: my mother-in-law. "Anna, something strange is happening here," she whispered, her voice trembling. It was past midnight and I was confused. The room was shrouded in darkness, both outside and in. I attempted to turn on the lights, but the switch refused to comply. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. Her cryptic response was unsettling. "You've done something, haven't you?" "Me? What are you talking about?" "The house. The darkness." Her accusations were absurd, but the unease in her tone chilled me. To fully understand this moment, I must take you back to the day I first met her. A year ago, my husband, Ethan, introduced me to his mother, Margaret. She lived in an opulent home with sprawling gardens and a sense of grandeur that felt imposing. I was a magazine editor at the time, juggling a demanding career. Despite my efforts to make a good impression, Margaret's judgmental eyes bore into me. "So, Anna, what are your plans after marriage?" she asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "I plan to leave my job and focus on being a homemaker," I replied. My career had consumed so much of my life that I was ready to embrace the role of a supportive wife. Margaret's response was sharp. "Can you manage without two incomes?" Her words lingered in my mind for days. Ultimately, I decided to continue working. Ethan and I married despite her reservations, and we moved into a small apartment together. Life was blissful at first. Ethan was attentive and supportive, and our shared hobbies brought us closer. But Margaret's shadow loomed over us, always finding ways to assert her influence. When I went on a business trip to Chicago, I returned early, eager to surprise Ethan. Instead, I found Margaret in my kitchen, cooking dinner. Ethan sat at the table, smiling at her as though she belonged there. "Your cooking is different from Mom's," he said when I walked in. Those words stung. Over the following months, Margaret's visits became more frequent. She claimed to be helping, but I felt more like an outsider in my own home. One evening, Ethan casually mentioned, "Mom thinks it would be better if we lived together. She says it'll save money." "Absolutely not," I replied firmly. The tension between us grew. I loved Ethan, but his inability to set boundaries with Margaret was suffocating. Despite my protests, Margaret began moving her belongings into our apartment while I was at work. When I confronted Ethan, he defended her. "She's just trying to help us. Why can't you be more understanding?" My patience wore thin. Determined to reclaim my space, I suggested we move to my childhood home, a house my parents had recently transferred to me. It was spacious, with enough room for us to live comfortably without interference. Ethan reluctantly agreed, but Margaret's reaction was swift. She arrived uninvited on moving day, declaring, "This house is perfect for all of us to live together." The audacity of her assumption left me speechless. "This isn't up for discussion," I said, trying to remain calm. Ethan's response shattered me. "Anna, this is our family. You need to compromise." Weeks turned into months, and my dream home became a battleground. Margaret's presence was constant, her criticisms unrelenting. I felt like a stranger in my own life. The final straw came when I returned from a work trip to find her moving furniture into the house. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Making this place more livable," she replied, smiling sweetly. Ethan sided with her. "She's only trying to help, Anna. Why can't you appreciate that?" I realized then that I was fighting a losing battle. Their alliance was unbreakable. Gathering my belongings, I left the house that night and moved in with my sister. It was a painful decision, but I knew I couldn't continue living under those conditions. The divorce proceedings were swift. Ethan seemed almost relieved to be rid of me. As I signed the papers, he smirked. Finally, no more drama. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, but also a sense of liberation. Returning to my career, I poured my energy into my work, finding solace in the familiarity of deadlines and creativity. I sold the house, using the money to start fresh. Months later, I received a call from Margaret. Her voice was frantic. "The house is dark. The lights won't work. What did you do?" I explained that I had canceled the utilities in preparation for selling the property. "You have no right to be there," I said firmly. Her response was venomous. "This is revenge, isn't it? Call it what you want. But you and Ethan have no claim to that house anymore. Leave before the neighbors call the police." That night, the police did arrive. Margaret and Ethan were escorted off the property, their humiliation complete. Ethan's actions had cost him his job, and they were forced to move in with Margaret's estranged husband. Their once grand lives were reduced to fragments. As for me, I've rebuilt. I've found peace in a new home, surrounded by supportive friends and family. The scars of the past remain, but they serve as reminders of my strength and resilience. I've learned to set boundaries and prioritize my own happiness. Life is unpredictable, filled with twists and turns we can't foresee. But even in the darkest moments, there is light. And for that, I am grateful. Yet, the memory of Margaret's intrusion lingered. The calm in my life seemed too good to be true. One day, while unpacking the last box in my new apartment, I discovered an envelope with Ethan's handwriting on it. It was dated just a week before our separation. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside was a letter written to Margaret, detailing plans to take over my parents' house entirely. Ethan had laid out every detail, from pushing me to accept joint ownership to eventually claiming it as his own. My stomach churned as I read his manipulative words. "Anna is naive. She'll agree eventually," he wrote. The betrayal stung deeper than I expected. This wasn't just Margaret's doing. Ethan had orchestrated it all along. Despite my anger, I felt validated. Leaving him was the right decision. Months turned into a year, and life had a way of healing wounds. I met someone new, a kind soul named Ben, who appreciated my independence and respected my boundaries. He knew my story and never once judged me for my past. One evening, as we sat in my cozy living room, sipping coffee, I received another unexpected message. This time, it was from Margaret. "I'm sorry," it read. I stared at the screen, unsure of how to respond. Ben noticed my hesitation. "What's wrong?" "It's Margaret. She apologized." He leaned closer, reading the message. "Do you believe her?" I shook my head. Number. "But it doesn't matter. She doesn't have power over me anymore." "Then let it go," he said simply, placing his hand on mine. And so I did. The chapter of Ethan and Margaret was finally closed. I had found my peace, and no one could take it away again. As I looked around my new home, filled with warmth and love, I realized that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself. And in the end, that's the greatest victory of all.